Welcome to Playback with another episode of history. Now, we all know this iconic silhouette, right? The symbol of the American dream, standing tall in New York Harbor. But what if I told you that pretty much everything you think you know about her is wrong?
Okay, check this out. Because if her creator had gotten his original wish, she wouldn't be in New York at all. She would be standing at the entrance of the Suez Canal in Egypt. And she wasn't designed as a Roman goddess, but as a Muslim peasant woman. And that famous torch? Yeah, that was originally a functional lantern, a literal lighthouse for ships.
This is the incredible, and kind of wild, story of how a rejected Egyptian project was strategically rebranded, repackaged, and shipped across the Atlantic to become maybe the most recognizable icon in America.
To really get this story, you first have to understand the massive ego and even bigger ambition of the man who created her, a French sculptor named Frédéric Auguste Bartholdi.
It all kicks off back in 1855. A young Bartholdi takes a trip to Egypt and is just completely blown away by the sheer scale of everything. The pyramids, the Sphinx, they fascinated him. But what really captured his imagination were the colossi of Memnon, these gigantic stone figures that have been watching over the desert for thousands of years.
He literally wrote in his diary that these statues produced an immeasurable emotion. He wasn't just impressed, he was deeply, profoundly moved, and this trip, it ignited an obsession in him to build something just as massive, just as monumental.
The best way to think about Bartholdi is as a kind of 19th century tech visionary. Seriously, he wasn't content making pretty little sculptures for a living room. He wanted to build the next big thing. He was obsessed with creating massive monuments that would just dwarf everything around them.
So in the 1860s, Bartholdi sees his big chance. The biggest engineering project in the entire world is happening in Egypt, the construction of the Suez Canal. And Bartholdi looks at this new global crossroads and thinks, you know what this place needs? A colossus.
So in 1869, he pitches his grand idea to Egypt's ruler, Isma'il Pasha. He called it Egypt Carrying the Light to Asia, a monumental statue that would stand right at the canal's entrance at Port Said.
The figure he designed was a world away from what we know today. This statue was an Egyptian woman from the peasant class, wearing their traditional robes and a headscarf. And in her hand, she held a lantern that was designed to be a working lighthouse, guiding ships into the canal. Sort of a modern echo of the ancient Colossus of Rhodes.
But there was just one, massive problem. The price tag. Bartholdi's proposal came with an estimated cost of $600,000. And in the 1860s, that was an absolutely astronomical sum of money.
And Egypt was broke. Ismail Pasha, the ruler, loved grand gestures, but the Suez Canal project had completely drained the national treasury. There was simply no money left for a giant statue. So Egypt said no, and they just built a much cheaper, much simpler lighthouse instead.
As you can imagine, Bartholdi was devastated. He had his grand design, but no client. He basically had a solution that was desperately looking for a problem. But then, history threw him a lifeline. He connected with another Frenchman, Édouard René de la Balaye, who proposed that France should gift a monument to the United States for its upcoming 100th anniversary in 1876.
And this is where Bartholdi gets really clever. You can just see the light bulb go off. He realizes he doesn't need to start from scratch. He's got a perfectly good design for a colossal woman holding a light. It becomes the ultimate copy-paste job of the 19th century. So, he keeps the core concept, a giant woman with a raised arm, but gives it a complete makeover for the American market. The peasant's robe becomes a classical Roman gown, to make her a goddess. The practical lantern becomes a symbolic torch of enlightenment. And that simple headscarf? It's swapped out for a radiant crown, with 7 spikes for the 7 seas and continents.
And maybe the most significant change was the face. The original sketches had features reflecting the statue's Egyptian identity. The new version was classicized, given a much more European look, and there's a popular rumor that he modeled the new, stoic face after his own mother.
So you have to ask, right? When he presented this new and improved statue to America, did he tell them it was a hand-me-down idea?
Oh, no way. Not a chance. Bartholdi publicly and fiercely denied any connection to his rejected Egyptian project. He insisted it was a completely original concept, born just for America. But, well, the sketches don't lie. The DNA is undeniable.
Well, the big pivot worked, and America was on board. But building it was a monumental challenge in itself.
It was constructed from thin copper sheets, hammered over this brilliant iron skeleton designed by none other than Gustave Eiffel. Yep, that Eiffel, the guy who would later build that famous tower in Paris.
And fundraising, it was a total nightmare. To get people excited and to get their money, they literally took the statue on tour, piece by piece. The arm and torch was displayed in Philadelphia. The head was shown off at the Paris World's Fair. And even then, Americans refused to pay for the pedestal, and it took a massive fundraising campaign led by newspaper publisher Joseph Pulitzer to basically shame the public into donating enough to get it built.
Finally, on October 28, 1886, a full 10 years after the centennial it was meant to celebrate, the statue was officially unveiled. The transformation was complete. The figure, once conceived as an Egyptian peasant, was now liberty enlightening the world.
Which brings us all the way back to our central question. After hearing all of this, can we say the Statue of Liberty is actually Egyptian? Well, the answer is a little complicated. Technically, no. The physical copper statue that was built in New York Harbor was always intended for America. But conceptually, absolutely yes. Without Bartholdi's original vision for the Suez Canal, and maybe more importantly, without Egypt rejecting that project, the Statue of Liberty as we know it simply would not exist.
So here's a final thought I want to leave with you. Knowing that this quintessential symbol of America was born from a rejected project for Egypt, that it's a recycled idea that just found a new home, does this hidden history change how you see Lady Liberty? We'd love to know your perspective in the comments.
If you enjoyed this dive into a bit of secret history, make sure you subscribe to Playback so you don't miss our next explainer. We'll be revealing the surprising story of another iconic structure, the Eiffel Tower. Thanks for watching.